because Russia was not brought to its knees by refusing to buy oil and gas. Russia shifted its oil and gas to India and China and others, but those are the two big buyers of the Russian exports. Okay, that meant that the previous importer of Russian oil and gas, Western Europe in particular, and Germany, the number one economy in Western Europe, relying on Russian oil and gas, they can't get that cheap energy anymore. What does that mean? They have to buy energy in the world market, including liquefied natural gas from the United States. But to produce that gas here, to convert it into liquid, to ship it on tankers over to Europe, means that they're paying 2 to 3 times more for their energy than they used to. Well, what does that mean? It means that the inflation inside Europe is very bad because the higher prices of energy become costs, higher cost to produce everything that takes energy, food, clothing, shelter, all the products of Europe. So, for example, the inflation in Europe right now is north of 10%, double what it is here in the United States, which means the Europeans can't compete with the United States as they normally do. They're being priced out of the market. All over the world, people who used to buy German machines or French luxury goods or Italian furniture or whatever it is are buying American or Chinese or Brazilian, but they're not buying Europe. You know, let me give you a sign of what it meant, because this is happening in our country too. Our inflation here, which has been very bad for the last 18 months, is also a product of these changes in the global economy coming out of the American-led sanctions war against Russia. Okay, here's an example. The first quarter of this year, January, February, March, quarter number 1 of the year 2023, economic growth in Germany, 0%. They didn't grow at all. Their population grew, the needs of their people grew, but their output of goods and services, 0. France, 0.2%. The United States, 1%. The People's Republic of China, 4.5%. Do you understand? China, which has been growing 2 to 3 times faster than the U.S. for 30 years, continues to do that. Western Europe is a disaster, and the United States is somewhere in between. These are very bad comparative numbers. That's hurting the American economy. Everybody who goes into a grocery store and discovers what it costs for a dozen eggs is discovering one of the consequences of an inflationary situation. So desperate is the inflation that our central bank, the Federal Reserve, over the last year has raised interest rates further and faster than at any comparable time in American history, meaning that everybody's credit card debt is going through the roof. Anybody imagining going to college is going to be facing higher costs of doing that. Ditto to buy your car, ditto to buy a home. I mean, we are facing rising costs that are directly connected. It's not the only cause, but this war in the Ukraine, this effort kind of desperately to hold on to a declining empire, because that's what's behind all of this, is costing us in countless ways. Today's Bloomberg has a lead headline that the consensus of economists is a recession is coming here later this year or early next, and it will cost, here's their number, 3.4 million jobs will be lost here in the United States. There's a cost. That's 10, 20 million people that are going to be suddenly without income, having to join the unemployed with all that that means in terms of your self-esteem, your feeling, your relationships with your spouse, with your children, with your community. The costs here they're all over the place once you ask what's going on and you see the connections. Yes, the government doesn't want you to because it doesn't want to get the blame for its policies. I understand that. And you have the cheap shots of the Republicans who want to get in and do what the Democrats are already doing, and so attack them for it. It's childish. It really affects all of us directly and indirectly in our daily lives. And I think we're going to be very sorry. The American working class, if you allow me, has really been put through the ringer. Over the last 30 to 40 years, the real wage, the amount of money an average worker gets, adjusted for the prices that average worker has to pay, has been stagnant. Hadn't gone up, hadn't gone down. It just sits. That's very strange in American history. For the previous 150 years, real wages and what we could afford to buy went up. That's a trauma to put a working class that has gotten used to American exceptionalism, to the notion that every generation will live better than the one before, that your parents will see you have a more comfortable life and you in turn with your children. And all of that's gone, been gone for 30 years, causing all kinds of havoc. Then we have the crash of 2000, the so-called dot-com crash. Then we have the even worse crash of 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis. Then we have the third crisis in 2020 before COVID hits, and then made worse by the pandemic. And look, you want to see another measure of the decline of the United States? We are 4.3% of the world's population, we Americans. And we suffered 16% of the world's deaths from COVID. A rich country, a dominant United States, that's a big F for failure to manage a public health emergency. What's going on? Why do we have these things? These are fundamental questions that ought to be on the top of everybody's agenda. We should hear what our leaders offer in the way of a response to that existential crisis. No, we don't. Instead, we're trying to fight an election based on what kind of bathroom trans people may be allowed to utilize. Talk about denial. It's a level of denial that is frightening because it's so close